Good morning, everyone, and happy Easter. Recently, I had the opportunity to attend a local event in Lafayette. It was called Rescue Acadiana. Some of you, I think, were there. And it was kind of like a day retreat thing led by Father John Ricardo, who presented his reflections on the gospel, on the basic story of Christ. But of course, he did it in a powerful and fresh way. And one of his insights that I really that really hit me was his reflections on what some of the early church fathers said about Jesus on Easter. But he connected these reflections from the early church fathers with a more modern idea, something that we find in nature. And some of you may be familiar with a term called ambush predator. If you don't know what that means, I'll explain it. An ambush predator is a creature that does not chase its prey, but it waits, perfectly still, hidden in camouflage. And just when the prey thinks it's safe, the predator strikes, unexpected, but lethal, quick. Some examples are crocodiles. They are still as a log, blending in with the swamp. And as their prey gets close to them, they burst with power. Or another is a snake, blending in with its environment, still in silence, until all of a sudden it strikes a lethal blow. Or a lion, sitting in the field, same color, can't even see it until all of a sudden its prey is way too close and the lion prances upon its prey. These are just a few examples of an ambush predator in nature. Similar, we see this type of behavior in war, the ambush mentality. And I think the classic example comes from the story of the fall of Troy. Many of us are familiar with this story. Some of you may have seen the movie quite a few years ago. But there's this long war. I think it was a 10-year war between the Greeks and the Trojans. Eventually, after much bloodshed, the Greeks decide to send a large wooden horse to the Trojans. And as they send that wooden horse there, it seems like it's a token of surrender. The Trojans are celebrating, look at this amazing gift that they have given us. So they bring it into their walls as a token of honor, a trophy. Instead, they didn't realize that that large wooden horse was hollow and filled with soldiers inside of it. And as everyone in Troy went to sleep that night, the Greek soldiers, one by one, left the wooden horse and then destroyed the city. What seemed like surrender was actually a strategy. What seemed like a trophy was really a trap. And the enemy, in this case the Trojans, let them in. And the Greeks, the predators, destroyed them from within. This is a classic example of ambush. And so I reflect in all these examples to point out what the early church fathers point out to us, that we live under the shadow of an enemy. And that enemy is death. Think about death. It's inevitable. Every single one of us will go to the grave. Every single one of us in history are unable to avoid death. Death happens, and it's tragic every single time. But in the beginning, it was not so. When God created Adam and Eve, Death was not part of that story. Adam and Eve were part of a perfect relationship with God, happily in the Garden of Eden. It wasn't until they committed that first sin of disobedience and a lack of trust in God's love. When they committed that first sin of pride, then suffering entered the world. The consequence of that sin was a broken relationship with God. And the way that was lived out was death. And since then, and even unto this day, death is part of the picture. Every single one of us experienced the realities of a fallen world filled with suffering, filled with pain, filled with brokenness and wounds, and ultimately filled with death and the grief that comes along with death. The Old Testament is story after story after story of God seeking to restore, heal, give life to his people that have fallen into the trap of death. And yet, story after story after story, humanity is wrestling with this reality of sin and suffering and death. It parallels the experience of a long, long war of countless battles of bloodshed. And then God took a new strategy. After many years, he finally decided, I will do a strategy of ambush. And so he walked into death like bait. He took on human flesh and looked like an ordinary man. He exposed himself to all the limitations of humanity, the suffering, the rejection, even crucifixion. His total surrender on the cross looked like an utter failure. And the enemy rejoiced. But hidden inside that humanity was divinity. And although death swallowed up Jesus Christ, just like every other man in history, Christ entered the realm of death like a Trojan horse and destroyed it from within. That's what the early church fathers point out for us. The enemy never saw it coming. He had no idea that Jesus could do that. He knew Jesus was important, but he had no idea of the divine power of God, that God could destroy death forever. When Jesus entered the realm of death, the souls of the righteous were there waiting for him. They were not yet in heaven because there was not yet a Savior. You can imagine the Easter joy of these souls of the righteous who were long awaiting for centuries to finally be released and to enter the glory of heaven. For those that have seen The Passion, that great movie, that film that Mel Gibson made some years ago, a powerful film, and it's always a moving meditation on the events of Easter. But at the very end of the Passion, after Jesus dies, there's this scene that used to confuse me. The scene of Satan kind of in this wasteland of rocks, and he's just screaming. And he's by himself, and he's just screaming and screaming in great, utter anger. And I knew that, okay, yeah, Satan's upset that Jesus died, but it wasn't, something was missing in my understanding of it until I understood this ambush predator mentality. There is Satan in the realm of death, and Christ stole, robbed, rescued all of the souls of the righteous. And Satan is now there by himself, angry because he was totally ambushed and never saw it coming. The grave now becomes the place of ambush and the place of resurrection. And that is what Christ has done for us. That's the kind of God that we believe in. So often, because most of us have probably grew up Christian, and we do this every year, sometimes Easter can kind of get watered down into just another beautiful day in spring, a sweet little day for kids to enjoy the sunshine and the Easter egg hunts. And don't get me wrong, that's amazing. I love that stuff. But sometimes we forget that Christ is not this effeminate man who's wearing white robes with long hair. Christ is a warrior. Christ went into a battle and much bloodshed was given. Christ is the epitome of strength and masculinity, who rescued you and me from the realm of eternal death. For those who believe and follow Christ, there is another way. And that way is eternal glory with God the Father, Son, and Spirit. I want each of you to think in your own life right now, where does it seem like death is still winning? Because I believe if many of us still give in to those lies, depending on the day and the season. Because it's true, still in our human experience, we still experience sin and suffering and the tragedy of death. We still experience grief and addiction, worry and anxiety, the heaviness of depression, the insecurity of fear and shame. We still wonder and doubt whether or not God is really there or if he really cares. We still wrestle with these things, but it's different for us. Even though we wrestle with it and even though we face it, it's different for Christians. We have real Easter hope. Our hope is not just a cliche optimism. Our hope is not just a sweet little graphic or meme that we see on social media. Our hope is not just a little nudge of the shoulder. Our hope is in the warrior, Jesus Christ, who entered into death and destroyed it forever. Easter says, don't be fooled. God does some of his best work in the stillness and in the silence, in the tombs. What seems like a defeat may just be the beginning of your greatest victory. Today we proclaim with utter faith, we are an Easter people. We really believe in the resurrection. We believe that Jesus of Nazareth is a historical figure. He actually lived 2,000 years ago. He truly died, and he truly rose from the dead. Our hope in this world is because Christ rose. If Christ didn't die, then what's the point? If Christ didn't die, then we shouldn't be wasting our time this morning. Just go to your barbecue and skip church. If Christ didn't die, then you might as well just give in to the despair of all of the pain and grief and suffering that you experience. If Christ didn't rise, then you might as well just notice the superficiality of all the cliche optimism that the world offers sometimes. If Christ didn't die, there's no point in caring for your neighbor. You're all alone and nobody actually cares. But if Christ rose, everything changes. If Christ rose, it's all different. We have a real person to give our hope in. Today, always, and forever. this is the most important moment of our faith. Christ is risen. And because of that, we do not run from death. We follow a Savior who ambushed it. Hey guys, thanks again for listening to our podcast. Don't forget to click the links below to learn more about our mission. Thanks.